The year is 1709. The winds of summer sweep across the plains of Poltava, a small town in the heart of what is now Ukraine. Dawn breaks, and the air is thick with smoke and dew. Men stand in silence, wearing the blue and yellow uniforms of the Swedish Empire, their faces pale from hunger and frost. Across the field, the banners of Tsar Peter the Great flutter in the rising light. Two empires face each other, one at the height of its pride, the other on the edge of rebirth. In the early 18th century, Sweden ruled the north. From the Baltic to the heart of Germany, its armies had conquered everything before them. The young king, Charles XII, only 15 when he took the throne, became the Lion of the North, bold, fearless, and brilliant. He led his soldiers to victory after victory, crushing Denmark, Poland, and Saxony. The world watched in awe. But pride can blind even the greatest kings. In 1708, Charles turned east. His goal to destroy Russia and forced Tsar Peter the Great to his knees. He led 40,000 men across rivers and forests, through rain, mud, and endless cold. But Peter had learned the art of patience. As the Swedes advanced, the Russians retreated, burning fields, emptying villages, and destroying supplies. The land itself became an enemy. The Swedish war machine, designed for quick, decisive battles, was being slowly bled dry by an opponent who refused to fight on their terms. Then, winter came early that year, the cruel winter of 1708 to 1709. The cold was so deep that birds froze in mid-flight and rivers turned to solid glass. Men slept beside their dying fires and never woke again. Horses collapsed in the snow, cannons froze to the ground. Of the 40,000 soldiers who marched into Russia, barely half survived to see the spring. Yet Charles pressed on, his iron will unbroken, determined to reach Poltava, a fortress town on the river Vorskla. His army was a ghost of its former self, but his ambition burned as fiercely as ever. By the spring of 1709, Charles's weakened army had finally reached its objective. Still, he laid siege to Poltava, where a Russian garrison held firm. Day after day, Swedish guns pounded the wooden walls. But inside, the Russians would not yield, and outside, Peter's main army was drawing near. Charles had hoped for a quick victory to replenish his supplies and restore his army's morale. Instead, he found himself bogged down in a costly siege with the clock ticking. Soon, the hunters would become the hunted. Tsar Peter's army was vast, over 45,000 strong, trained in the modern ways of war. His cannons were larger, his men well fed and rested. He wasn't just waiting, he was preparing. He built a chain of redoubts, small earthen forts, across the field, creating deadly traps for the advancing Swedes. These weren't just defenses, they were killing grounds, designed to break the famous Swedish charge. And in the center of it all, Peter waited, calm, confident, and ready to strike the final blow against his old rival. On the night of June 27th, Charles gathered his officers. His right foot had been shattered by a musket ball days earlier. He could not walk, only command from a stretcher. Still, his voice was steady. "We march at dawn," he said. "Victory or death." The men nodded, silent. They had followed their king across half of Europe, from the shores of Denmark to the forests of Poland. They had faced overwhelming odds before and triumphed. Now, they would follow him into hell itself. Dawn, June 28, 1709. The air trembled with the beat of drums. Muskets clicked and cannons rolled forward. The Swedes advanced through the mist, columns of blue coats moving silently toward the Russian lines. Then, the earth exploded. The Russian redoubts opened fire, cannons thundering, smoke and fire swallowing the field. The Swedish advance faltered under the storm of iron. Yet still they charged, through gunfire, through flame, through death itself, driven by the discipline that had made them legendary. But the plan was broken before it truly began. The Swedish left wing became trapped among the redoubts, systematically cut down by Russian guns. The right pushed forward only to find the enemy waiting behind fresh, unbroken lines. Peter's army counterattacked with deadly precision, cavalry on the flanks, infantry pouring fire into the center. The Swedish formations, once unstoppable, collapsed under the sheer weight of Russian firepower. On the field, the cries of the wounded mixed with the relentless thunder of artillery. The Lion of the North was bleeding out on the plains of Poltava. By mid-morning, it was over. The Swedish army, once thought to be invincible, lay shattered. Their generals were dead or captured. Their king, wounded and helpless, was carried from the field by his most loyal guards. 9,000 men were killed or wounded in just a few hours. Thousands more laid down their arms, their spirits broken. The dream of a Swedish empire, forged in a century of victories, ended that day on the banks of the Vorskla River. Across the field, Tsar Peter stood triumphant. His soldiers cheered, their muskets raised in a deafening salute. The banners of Sweden, torn and bloodied, were laid at his feet as trophies of his monumental victory. Now, he declared, with God's help, the foundations of St. Petersburg are laid firm for all time. With Poltava, Russia became a true empire, a dominant force that would shape the destiny of Europe for centuries to come. The student had surpassed the master. King Charles fled with a handful of survivors, across rivers, through forests, under constant pursuit from Peter's cavalry. Days later, he crossed into Ottoman lands, seeking refuge in the fortress of Bender. There, the once mighty conqueror became a guest, then a prisoner of politics. He would eventually return to Sweden, but he would never again lead his grand army to victory. His era of conquest was over. After Poltava, Sweden's power withered away. The empire that had ruled the Baltic for a century was gone, its territories picked apart by its neighbors. The world had changed. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted eastward. From this day onward, Russia would stand among the great nations of Europe, its influence reaching across the continent. The Great Northern War would drag on, but its outcome was now certain. For the soldiers who fought that day, there was no glory, only pain, hunger, and death. On the fields of Poltava, the snow would later fall over tens of thousands of graves. No names, no songs, only the cold, unforgiving silence of the Ukrainian steppe, a silent testament to the cost of ambition. Historians call it the end of Sweden's age of greatness. But for those who stood there, soldiers of both sides fighting for their kings and their nations, it was something deeper, a lesson carved into the earth itself, that no power, no king, no empire can stand forever. June 28, 1709, Poltava, where the Lion of the North fell, and the Eagle of the East began to rise. The sound of battle may have faded, but its echo still rolls across the centuries, a reminder that even empires are mortal. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more epic history brought to life, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the next battlefield.